Hi, everybody. My name is Paula Wilson, and I'm the Member Services Manager at CLEARC. We're excited to welcome you to the Collegiate Access for Young Musicians series, co-presented with CLEARC and El Sistema USA. This session on optimizing your application audition, it's the second part of a series of 6 virtual college prep sessions to be presented throughout the school year. And so you can learn more and register for the remaining sessions at equityarc.org/events. And so for tonight, we're going to hear from Dr. Alex Powell. He's a music admissions expert who ran admissions at a number of conservatories like Cleveland Institute of Music and New England Conservatory. He's now a consultant who works with students and families to optimize their music school applications. So after his presentation, we'll open the floor to any questions that you might have. But without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor to Dr. Alex Powell.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Glad to see you're here. If you also want to put your instrument over there in the chat, that's always good to know. So I always like to see that. But we're going to try to run through a lot of information. Obviously, if you are a 12th grade student, some of you are. This is all coming quite fast. And so there's a lot to do in the coming weeks for you. And if you're a younger student, it's a taste of what's to come. So I'm really glad you're here. I'm glad you're thinking ahead to be prepared. So I'm going to go ahead and share some slides with you all. And we'll go through them, and feel free to drop questions as they come up in the chat. And we'll also there's time for questions at the end. So here we are. So yeah, a little bit more about me. You see here that I went to music school a bunch of times. So as a student, I got to apply many times as an undergrad and through graduate school. So I got to see that. That's how I came into the admissions world and got to know the process on that side. But then I've worked for nearly 20 years, almost always specifically in college music admissions. I started as a grad student at NEC, and then I was at the Laundry School of Music for many years, then back to NEC for 7 years. And then since then, I've been working with the Cleveland Institute and San Francisco Conservatory, and a lot of other schools and students as well. So what I've been doing most recently is helping students like you who are going through the process. So last year I had 15 seniors, and I had some amazing students, and they ended up in lots of great places. So you see down there at the bottom where some of the where my seniors are now as first-year students. So a lot of success, but it's complex, and it was hard to get there, as I'm sure you anticipate. The admissions process for music majors is, what all of your peers who are not going to be music majors have to do, plus much more. And I think sometimes it's hard for people who aren't musicians to understand how much more this process, that you're taking on if you're going to try to pursue music. Because there's just all these steps that everyone else who applies to college does not have to do. I think to always try to look on the bright side. I think the great thing about going through a process as a music major is you get to know the schools so much better than people just, submit an application, wait to hear back. As a music major, you need to connect with faculty. You need to connect with students there, conductors, all these people you're going to work with. And so I think ultimately when music majors make their choice, it's a really informed choice, perhaps a lot more so than students who aren't music majors. So maybe try to always frame all this extra work you're doing as like, it's going to pay off in the long run. So just to tease some of the thing and much more, and we'll get into a lot of this stuff in more detail here in the coming slides. But, so you're going to submit all the standard stuff with your transcripts and academic recommendation letters and essays. But you're also going to submit an artistic resume. You're also going to have to put together a repertoire list. You're going to have recommendations from your private teacher typically, but also sometimes conductors, music educators at your school. Many, depending on the programs you're looking at, many of the more competitive programs will ask for pre-screening recordings as a step to see whether you're going to get a live audition. And as I said, a lot are coming up December 1st. for the more competitive programs. So that's coming up soon, and we'll get a lot more into pre-screening here in a minute. Some schools require music theory testing. It's probably not the majority, but some do. And so it's always something to keep on your radar. A lot of them now do it. They have online testing that you can take, or some like on your audition day may run you through, a quick kind of oral skills test and maybe, ask you a few questions just to understand your familiarity with music theory. Something else might happen. Live auditions. We hope we get live auditions and have the opportunity to go to school and show them what you really can do. And then also trial lessons, and then ultimately studio placement. So for music majors, performance majors, you need to know who you are committing to over the next 4 years. So it's important along the way in the process to have a lesson with that teacher so you realize whether you like someone's teaching style, whether it feels like a good fit. And then part of the application process is making these requests many times for a studio. I would like to be in this teacher's studio, and then finding out whether you got that. So, non-music majors will just, hey, you got into this school. Music majors often, well, you have to get into the university, but then you have to get admitted as a music major and you get admitted to a specific studio. So there's a lot more to keep track of. Just some overall strategies for admission success. One, and probably among the most important, is demonstrated interest. Schools, just like everything, like every time you're on your phone or device and you're like looking at things, schools track their interactions with you because they have all this data. College admissions has gotten very competitive, and they have all this data that tells them the more a student interacts with us, the more likely they are to come. And when schools care about their acceptance rates, that means they want to admit students who will come. Because otherwise, if they admit a lot of students who are just going to go to other schools, they have to dig really far down on their wait list. That pushes up their acceptance rate. It makes them look worse to their, school president and their board, and to, the rankings agencies and things like that. So admissions deans are very keen on the data, and which says people who express more interest, who do some of these things, are more likely to come. And so then sometimes it helps you. They will be more likely to admit you if you've done these things. So campus visit, right? Particularly, if you live very far away from a school, they don't necessarily expect that you're going to come for a visit. But if it's a school that's nearby within kind of relatively easy driving distance, and they don't have a record that you've ever visited, they look at the data and say, this person's probably not going to come. They're not that serious. They're just, maybe we're a backup school to them. Contact, with admissions office, with faculty, opening their emails, coming to an event that they host, or even a virtual event. They track all of this stuff kind of in your applicant record. Here it says optional essays, optional interviews. Many schools will say, oh, we have this, you can do an interview with an alum, one of our alumni who volunteers to interview students. If you want to get into a school, I always tell students, like, it's not optional, because often these are put out there as kind of a little bit of like an additional test about how serious you are, because they do assume, schools say, well, if a school's at the top of your list, you're going to do all the optional things. If it's 10th on your list, you may opt out. So for so many of these things, try to do the optional stuff. Even applying early, even applying, a week earlier than the deadline. They know when you've applied, right? They've got it down to the minute of when you submitted that application. And even things like that look like you're a bit more of a serious candidate, the person who waits till 11:59, on the application deadline day. So obviously, talked about this earlier, music majors, you really want to connect with possible studio teachers. Firstly, for you, because this is an important relationship. You're trying to find a mentor. To get this far, you've had good teaching along the way. Well, we've got to find that next person. And so you want to make sure that you like that person, you like their teaching style, and you feel like they there's possibility in this kind of student-teacher relationship here. Um, you also want to do it because if they like you, you can have an advocate inside of a school, right? And that's awesome. You know, you want someone who knows you and, oh, I worked with them and can say good things about you. So, you know, usually that starts with an email introduction. You know, sometimes we're lucky enough to meet someone who teaches at a school through a master class or like a summer program, and they come. And so, you know, those are great opportunities if you play for someone to stay in touch and say, hey, I played for you at Interlochen, or, some festival you were at. Um, but, it's fine to just reach out to teachers and say, I'm applying, and I'm interested in learning more about how the trumpet department works at your school. And that's where, usually starts, but obviously we're working toward, before you make a commitment, to have a chance to have a trial lesson with this person. Some It really varies. Trial lesson policies from faculty are often quite different depending on the school and depending on the faculty member. A lot of schools just let the faculty handle it themselves. Some larger universities often will pay the faculty member to give a certain number of trial lessons as kind of like, a recruitment part of their contract. But a lot of other times, especially if you're looking at more independent conservatories, it's very, they allow the faculty to set their own policies. So I'd say at the really competitive studios, because faculty may get 100 emails every fall, they probably aren't going to say, yeah, let's just have a trial lesson with every person, because that's just not possible. But many of them say, well, if you're invited for a live audition, then I'll connect with you. Or if you're admitted to my studio, then I'll connect with you. So some teachers, it takes a little bit longer. And then you will find teachers who are very active recruiters and say, yes, or if you're in the area, I want to get together with you, or I want to have a Zoom session with you, and things like that. So that one can be a little tricky to negotiate because it can be rather different. But just in a lot of ways, the best advice is put yourself out there and see what they offer, see um, their policies. One thing to note is that some faculty do charge just like a private lesson fee for a trial lesson. Ask in advance, right? Because a surprise where it's like, oh, that lesson was $150 and you're surprised. No one wants that surprise. So, if a faculty member does offer a trial lesson and you're, close enough to go there and meet with them, just it's one of these things where it's like, oh, what do you want me to prepare, and do you charge for the lesson, right? So at least you know what you're getting into. And if it is, you know, and some faculty will charge when you're still an applicant, but certainly they're not going to charge you if they want you to come in their program. So you might say, okay, well, I'll just hold off and meet with you a little later in the process, right? So that's all valid. Planning ahead for pre-screening recordings. Obviously, if you're a junior or sophomore, you have tons of time to plan ahead with your teacher, with your repertoire. That's great. But even for seniors, just don't wait until 2 days before the deadline. It's too pressure filled, right? So even, now we're a few weeks out, you can just start having some recording sessions. And again, I will get into pre-screening a bit more, but just don't wait till that last day, because people get sick, things happen, pianist falls through, stuff like that, and it's just adds too much stress. So much of my approach is, how do we take stress out of this process when we can? And often it is planning ahead. And then we'll get into it more, but audition preparation is really important. Okay, so seniors, you're right in the midst of this, so a lot of this is going to sound very familiar to you, and you'll be like, yeah, I know exactly what he's talking about. The sophomores and juniors, this is coming, so just be aware that all this is coming. So there's about, in general, two different paths in terms of like the paperwork application that you're going to be facing. The most common one is the Common App. which tons of colleges and universities are on. So you don't have to fill out quite as much cross information, but they still do each have their own separate questions and tabs. And so, it's still somewhat complicated to do. But what music majors nearly always need to do is submitting the Common App is one step of the process. And this is the one that, I think sometimes people can lose track of. So you nearly are always going to have complete an additional application, the kind of School of Music application, the School of Music portal. If it's a named school like Indiana Jacobs, it's like, oh, the Jacobs application. So you do the, Common App plus the Jacobs, or, so you'll need to do that. I put, some of the companies that they use for this. You'll hear, oh, do your slide room application, do your accepted application, or sometimes they have their own institutional portal that you're just logging in. The reason for this is the Common App is not really equipped to handle all the things that the schools want from music majors. The Common App is not equipped to take a bunch of pre-screening videos and only disperse them out to the violin faculty. That's not how the Common App works. And in fact, at a lot of large universities, the central admissions office is in a building, somewhere on campus. And then the School of Music has their own admissions team, often anywhere from like one to, depending on the size of the school, 4 or 5 staff. And so they have their own School of Music admissions office. Many times the School of Music admissions office cannot see all the details of your Common App because central admissions controls that, right? And so they know you've applied and they know you've requested to be a music major, but to get information from you, they've built these workarounds because the Common App doesn't, take these things in consideration. So you go in and you kind of apply again for the same school, but with your music information. So within that music application, you'll typically, if they require pre-screening, you're going to upload your recordings there. If they don't require pre-screening, often that's where you pick your audition date. Great, I want to come on February 8th. And you have to do that because otherwise you're not going to have an audition. Artistic resume and repertoire list. And I have slides later where I'll talk a little bit more about what those are going to look like. A recommendation from your private teacher. In the Common App, most of the recommendations that they'll request will focus on academic teachers from your school, whereas the music school wants to often hear from your private teacher, or if you're not currently studying with someone, kind of the conductor or band director who knows you best. So there's that music recommendation. And then they also tend to have more essays, right? So in Common App, there's the Common App essay. And sometimes the school requires other short writing samples. And then the School of Music wants to hear about why you want to be a musician, what are your goals, and so there's more. So it's often just very complex and trying sometimes because you feel like you're applying twice to every school. You essentially are. It's a little simpler for the independent conservatories because a lot of the small conservatories are not on the Common App. You're not going to find New England Conservatory and San Francisco CIM and Juilliard on the Common App. So they just have their own applications where you go in and it's kind of one stop. You don't have to apply twice to those schools, but it will basically include, kind of all these things that you would put into the music portal for the other schools. The good news is once you have all these things for one school, it tends to be a decent amount of just mix and match formatting, changing it a little bit because this school wants, something in this order. But, you don't have to reinvent the wheel for every application. Cool. All right. So you're going to, even though you want to study music, you're going to do a decent amount of writing as you apply to college. So let's go through some of those pieces so we know what we're talking about. One that you'll do, almost everyone has to do, is a Common App essay because it's almost inevitable that one or more of your schools will be on the Common App and you'll need to do that kind of general essay. There are a lot of Common App essay topics. They have a lot of prompts. even most years there's one in like choose a topic of your own. So it's like very, very open-ended on what you do. So a few things I just want to talk about with Common App essay, and especially for the seniors who are probably working on those, and juniors who should start thinking about those pretty soon. If you're applying as a music major, they know that, right? The central admissions office is going to see, okay, you're a serious musician. They're going to see a lot of this on your Common App activities list. They're going to see that you're auditioning in the School of Music and wait to hear the result of that. So they'll know that about you. And I think a mistake that some musicians will make is that their Common App essay is just like, here's why I love music. Here's, my goals about music. And it's just like very music centered. And I think that sometimes is a missed opportunity because um, it can be good to show them that you have more to you as a human outside of just being a good musician. And this is what you can do in the Common App essay. And so even, skipping down to one of my bullet points toward the bottom, where I say, you try to understand what aspects of your candidacy you're trying to convey. You're going to audition to try to convey that you're a good musician. So don't try to write, and convince them in writing that you're a good musician. I think in the essay, the Common App essay, it's sometimes good to show them there's more to me. I'm going to bring more to your campus than just being a good musician. Okay. So, a musical experience can absolutely and often is the setting for something, for a Common App essay. But as I say, it should not be the kind of point, right? So if it's like, I was in this orchestra and we did this tour and we got to experience this, and here's what I learned about, the broader world, that's awesome because now we're seeing something about you outside of music. It's not, I was in this youth orchestra and I played my cello really well, So again, music can be the setting, but I think often in the Common App essay, try to make sure that it's not the point of the essay. Authenticity, I say here, and then the next point is like absolutely get help with grammar and usage. Get your English teachers, get parents, get friends, get your private teacher to look at it and help you with some things like that. But don't allow your own voice to be hidden. What happens too many times is an essay with, if you have so many people helping you correct it, say, I would do this, I would do that, then all of a sudden it just becomes this bland amalgam of ideas of like your teachers and parents, and it's not you. And admissions people can like kind of see right through that if it's almost too polished and just like, I don't know. It often ends up boring, and it's like, where's the student in here? Where's their personality? I'm completely missing it because it got like edited out. So try as you work on your essays to make sure that while absolutely get help, don't allow the help to kind of push you and your personality aside. And that's in all aspects of this process. This is your life. This is your application. The more authentically you can show them who you are, I think the more likely you are to find a great place to be. And maybe that's even, I should have started with this point, because if you show these institutions who you are and they're like, yes, that's the perfect type of person for our institution, like they're going to do amazing here, they fit the ethos, awesome, then I think you have a good chance of having a great experience. If you show them a kind of fake version of you, it is kind of like, oh, this is the ideal version of me, and they say, yes, that ideal version would be great here, but that's far from where you are right now, you might end up in a situation where you're like, this is not the right fit. I know we all like want to have success and get in places, but don't get in at the expense of like pretending to be something you're not. Show them who you are, and if they don't like it, like that's going to be their loss. There's going to be plenty of schools that see your value and want you as part of their community. So let's aim for those. Some other things you'll be writing as you go through the process. Statement of purpose or career goals. This is often in the music portal, the music supplement. the music faculty want to know, and they often specifically ask, why do you want to do this with your life? Why do you want to be a musician, or where do you see it headed? Because they want to see if they see that in you too, and if they see that their program fits that. Because sometimes you could say, you know, I want to be, an orchestral musician, and their program is not, their program is more chamber focused, and they're like, ooh, maybe this is not the best place to be for our program. So again, authenticity there, because that can help them determine that, but you will be writing something like that. A lot of schools now have, I kind of lumped it into like a large diversity slash community statement. So, with court cases coming down on lots of Ivy schools about, how they look at diversity in their application process, the solution that schools are moving towards say, we do holistic review of the person and try to see who they are as a complete person, instead of like, having some type of point system where, and again, that's I think where they ran into legal trouble. But the schools, because of that, they're giving you a chance to kind of self-identify, who you are, a community that's important to you. So many schools have this question now that will say something like that, of like, we love having students from all sorts of backgrounds and communities. So tell us about something that's important to you, or community that you belong to, or, and how that's impacted your life. And so, this is a wide range of answers, and it could be, something tied to your upbringing, but it also could be like, I happened to join the chess club and it just became part of me, and I found my people there. Or, sometimes it can relate to music. But it's a really common question now that so many schools are asking. So you just have to be prepared for that and understand why it's there. I think, again, my further bullet point down there, who is your audience, or like what you're trying to convey, that's the opportunity. If you feel like you want the admissions officers to know something about your background, that's the opportunity right there. And it's again, sometimes the way they ask the question, it's not totally clear. But if you get anything that's about that, where you feel affinity, where you feel community, that's a real opportunity, I think, with that statement. Also, a lot of schools ask what I called like demonstrated interest prompts. So going back to that idea that, if they want to know who's actually interested in their school specifically. So they'll ask these questions. It's like, what about coming to our school is going to help you on your career path or something. They want to make sure that you're not just, applying because you heard it was like a good school, that you've actually done some research and you know things about the program. And so in that type of essay, a lot of schools ask it. What I say here is be specific. Like, it's fine to say, I love the clarinet teacher there, professor, whatever. And I've heard great things about the wind ensemble conductor, and name them. Because what they want to, the whole point of them, the audience is the admissions office, but the whole point here is they just want to make sure that you aren't just applying as like a safety school. Because if it's a safety school, why would you take all this time to learn all these details about them? Okay, so be specific in that type of question. Yeah, so you will do a decent amount of writing. Many times it's, a lot of things that are 500 words or less, or 250 words or less. So it looks like a lot, but it's not overwhelming, right? And it's yeah. And I guess one thing to mention is that the import, like the impact of the essays, varies based on the school, and the essay. So I would say more selective academic schools will spend more time reading the Common App essay, and really, trying to understand kind of what makes you tick, and whether that's a fit, and whether they have a spot for you when they're really selective. So, when you're looking at these more academic oriented programs, the music faculty are not going to, reject you based on your career goals. They want to know how well you play, and see your audition in those pieces. So some of those are more of like just FYI type of essays, but still do a good job, right? We want everything to look great and look like we're a serious candidate. I think that's the most important takeaway. All right, so a few things that you will be doing as a music major specifically, the artistic resume. So I say it's different than the Common App activities list. On the Common App, if you don't know, you'll know soon. You can pick up to 10 activities and kind of tell them how involved you were, how many hours per week, which years, and write a short description. And they're categorized. I always, in working with students, I always try to get their Common App activity list to show versatility. I don't like recommend it just be music, 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 music. Even if some things were music related, it's helpful to put some in as kind of leadership or volunteer, or things like that to show, you were thinking about these activities in a different way, and it's not just all music instrumental throughout. So the activities list, you want to show that you are involved, I'd say, in a versatile way, whereas on an artistic resume, you often want to show more focus, right? Because here, the artistic resume is specifically for the faculty in your major area in your instrument. And so, you don't want to show them that you don't have to necessarily hide that you did a lot of other activities, but you just want to make sure that we're concentrating the artistic resume in that specific area. So the idea is that it's just a quick snapshot. They can get to know you, kind of your music experience in a page or two, and learn a lot very quickly. So you're always going to list your private instructors on there and kind of how long you've been working with them. So typically just the years. I've been working with this person since 2018. You're going to list your performance experience, often in different categories where you would list like, solo things, solo opportunities and recitals, large ensemble, your orchestras and bands and things. And then maybe, if you did a chamber music group or a chamber music summer festival, you list some of those things. Summer festivals, if you've done any, you'd list, and any awards, if you ever placed in a competition or gotten honors through Allstate, that's something that you'd want to have on your artistic resume. One mistake that I see tons of students make, and I always make my students flip it around, is they'll start chronologically back when they're freshmen and then work up to the more recent stuff. Flip it. I want to always, on all resumes, I really want to see the most recent first and then work backward. And within reason, right? If you won a really huge award, a big name competition, and it was your sophomore year, you can keep that at the top of the awards section. But in general, put the recent stuff first so that we can kind of see that quickly. I added a resource here because it's a good one, the Eastman Institute for Music Leadership. A friend of mine is over there. They do really great work. I was looking on their site and they have this resume handbook there at the link. And you can also just Google Eastman Institute for Music Leadership resumes and get there. Because there's no just one answer for what an artistic resume looks like, and it will change in your career. And sometimes it just depends on the instrument too, right? So if you're a pianist, it's going to look a little bit different from a singer, from an orchestral musician. If you're a composer, it might look entirely different from all of them. So that link there, and again, easy to find on Google, that Eastman has a bunch of different options you can kind of look at and then choose, okay, I kind of like this format here, but then I don't have as much experience in chamber music, so I'm going to expand this one like this other. So you'll see, if you follow that, I highly recommend you do, that there are a bunch of ways to kind of convey this information. Repertoire list. Not every school asks for this. I think it used to be more common, but many schools still do. So you're likely going to have to deal with this. Um, Often they will say it's supposed to be a representative repertoire list, right? Which means not every single piece you've ever played, right? We don't want 10 pages of just like, oh yeah, and then in seventh grade band, no, too much, right? So focusing on the more recent, more difficult repertoire, and when possible, showing your focus. If you like a certain composer, it's not bad to have Mozart on there 5 times, because that tells them something. That says, okay, well, this student likes to dig into this Mozart repertoire. So um, in your rep list, typically, solo works almost always have to list. Chamber music, if you've done it, orchestral repertoire. Again, this just depends on your instrument, because wind brass percussion players often have more kind of orchestral excerpts that they'll list on a repertoire list, whereas like upper strings don't necessarily put or put excerpts on there. But it's this is also it's just designed to be a snapshot so they can kind of see where you're coming from. They do not admit students based on repertoire lists, right? You could make the most amazing looking one ever. This is that's not the point of it. Don't put things on your list that, if they're like, oh, I would love to work on this in a lesson, and you're like, I just put, so don't be authentic about it. And it's okay if it's a little shorter, right? It will grow in your career. And then, the one piece of advice here is always to list when you're putting together your repertoire in each section, list by the composer's last name. And then I even had a little example, like try to be specific where, like, with this Bach partita, if you don't list the movements, it's assumed that kind of the whole thing. For that second partita, it was like, well, we didn't have the chaconne at the end, so I specified the movements here. And then like the Mendelssohn, it's only movement one. I don't know the whole concerto. So, try to be relatively clear so they don't say, oh, cool, let's start to work on that third movement. And you're like, no, that's not on my repertoire. All right, so great. Now pre-screening. Okay, so now we've done a lot of paperwork, and now it's time to do the fun part and the part that matters most when you're preparing your applications. Most of the more selective programs really won't look at your written material until you've passed pre-screening. So a lot of that work is they'll never look at unless they invite you for a live audition. So pre-screening decisions are really typically not based on recommendations, not based on essays, not based on repertoire lists and resumes and any other great thing, an award you've won. Can you play? Are you intriguing enough of a candidate musically to invite? And like I said, not to be scary, but like, many schools will deny a large percentage of their music applicant pool right at pre-screening. It's just a practical thing. They, depending on your instrument and depending on the school, sometimes they're getting hundreds of applicants in your instrument, and they can't, have 12 audition days to hear, 300 candidates. So they have to kind of get it down to a reasonable logistical situation soon. While the numbers and saying, oh, they're going to cut 70% of people is intimidating, again, looking for the silver lining is you want to be invited to places where you have a good chance. Traveling around the country to take auditions, getting out of school, coordinating all kind of logistics with your family and your teacher and all this stuff, it takes a lot. And so, the pre-screening can help you, and if they say, we don't think you're a good candidate, for undergrad, sometimes that can be a good thing. It hurts. It's like, oh, we get the pre-screening rejections. Anytime we get a rejection, it's going to hurt. But also, it's going to help you get more focused on the places that see that potential in you and feel like it's a good fit. Okay, so a little bit more about pre-screening. Pre-screening is really hard, and for a lot of students, it's one of the first time they've even been asked to make recordings in a serious way. You may have done it more if you've auditioned for summer festivals by recording and stuff, but for a lot of undergrad applicants, this is one of their first times really working on recordings. Um, it's very hard. Recording is its own art. There are artists, brilliant artists who are terrible at making recordings. There are mediocre artists who are great at making recordings. And so, it's kind of it's a practice unto itself. I think in my experience, the hardest part is often mental, right? There's typically no audience there. And so, and it's just a recording device. And so it's hard to get any energy from the recording device. Sometimes that's what we love and why we're drawn to music and live performance is there's the energy of the audience, there's energy of fellow players. Um, just staring at kind of this, your iPhone recording you is not necessarily something that's going to give you a lot of energy, but sometimes we have to kind of get in the mental space to fake that. Um, there's this safety of, well, there's always another take. So if I mess up, I can just stop and try again. I think that, you don't have that in live performance. There's something about the adrenaline of live performance because this is it, right? This is it. I have to do it right now. That can be very motivating for a lot of musicians, for a lot of us. Because you can always do another take, people start to get really tired. I work with students and they'll send me some of their pre-screenings and I'll say like they're called like, this is Beethoven take 11, and I start to get really worried for them because that's a lot of takes to try to get something, you're proud enough to send. Um, and then, people are trying to do a lot of recording in one session, and so it goes really long and it just gets, it's really hard. I even, talk to students, say, told them sometimes like if the session is not working that well, if we've planned ahead and we could possibly, do another session next week. Sometimes it's fine to wrap up a session early and say it's not my night, I'm just not feeling it, not getting the takes I want, instead of really exhausting yourself. In my experience, it rarely gets better if you're already feeling that fatigue. Um, and this, playing it safe, knowing there's another take, often leads to very boring recordings. And that's usually one of the biggest critiques that I've heard from faculty over the years as they review them is like, yeah, they played just fine, but it was so boring, right? And they don't, that when it's a very competitive landscape, you don't want to be boring. You want to be intriguing, right? You want to have, something about you that's like, let's hear more, because that's what this process is, right? You're not going to get in from a pre-screening. It's just one step to say, is there something interesting enough here to invite? So, show, lean into showing your artistry, showing kind of your musicality and potential over technique, and just try to be intriguing enough to invite. But it's very hard. Give yourself the benefit of the doubt. Also note that all the other students who are going through it are probably struggling in the same way. So having a little bit of kind of patience and forgiveness for yourself when making pre-screenings can also really help. Okay. Well, hopefully pre-screenings went well and you get invited for lots of live auditions. Now, there's often this inflection point here, and I didn't even talk yet about like how many places you should be applying to. And probably why I didn't talk about that yet is there's not a magic number, there's not a right answer. It really depends on you. Each student is different. It depends on how ambitious your list is. If your list is Juilliard and Curtis and Colburn, then it's like we better have a lot of other schools further down the list than schools that have sometimes 3 or 5% acceptance rates, right? But so for some students, you can have a list that only has 5 schools on it. I can feel really comfortable you're going to find a great fit here. And other times you need to have 15 because there's, depending on your instrument, depending on the school, they're so competitive at pre-screening and live audition that we need to have a lot of options. But once so even if you cast a really wide net and you apply to 15 schools, um, and you're invited to all 15 schools, my advice at that point is to not take 15 auditions. It's too much. I really think it's important to be like, wow, that's great. That's great feedback. I got 15 auditions. But you just, it's almost impossible to do 15 auditions well, for many reasons. So my next point is like, you want to be at your best for the programs you're really excited about. And if it's like, oh, I just audition weekend, in and out, and you're traveling, you're getting sick and you're tired, and then all of a sudden your top school audition comes up, you may be exhausted, right? So we want to be really careful about that. Um, it also gets really expensive to travel all over the place to do all these auditions. Um, so, it's another reason to think about how many live auditions you choose to take. So if you receive too many audition invitations, awesome problem. Congratulations, that's really great, but it's time to reassess. Some schools that are lower on your priority list at that point, you may say, is it okay to submit a recorded audition? My schedule's changed. I've got some conflicts now. I'd still like to stay in the running, but I can't make it there for a live audition. Many will say yes. Some may say no. And, again, if it's not a big enough priority for you, then that's the time to probably withdraw your application from that school. And that's fine. Remember, you can only go to one of these schools, right? So, we don't need to be admitted to 15 schools. We need to be admitted to a handful of schools that we really are really excited about. So a really important part about planning for auditions, don't do too many of them. Other things about planning for your auditions. The logistics of the audition trip, usually take a lot of family coordination. These things cost money many times because they're full days. You're going to have to stay in hotels and you're going to have to do all these things. So that's a really important time for good communication in your family with your support group to make sure that all this stuff is coming together and there's no surprises and you don't miss something because of travel. Also, traveling with an instrument can be really tricky. You probably already know this, but think about with your specific instrument what that can mean, right? Like I just had all kind of issues with, well, then they wouldn't let me take my cello on the plane, or my oboe was cracking because the humidity in Boston is this or that. So just really talk with your teacher about their experience in traveling with their instrument all of those things. But just be aware that it can be challenging. This one's really important to me, and I think we want to spend a little time on us. Discuss the family support you need on the audition day. This one comes from personal experience of, when I was the dean of admissions at NEC for many years, seeing a number of quite heated family arguments in the hallways of the conservatory on audition days. Because it's a stressful time anyway. The student's under stress, the parent, this is often very new to them. And it's an unfamiliar environment. It's just tricky. And so stress is high. Every student is different in how they kind of need to be in the zone, be in the proper headspace to have a successful audition. Some students love having the parent along and they're helping with their case and helping with their coat and kind of being their roadie or something, like, helping with the logistics. Other students, that's not helpful. It's not helpful to have, a parent right outside their warm-up room and then right outside the audition room. I would almost, even if your student would want you to, I would recommend all parents kind of stay away from the audition room lobby or the audition room windows. We'd always try to shoo the parents away from the doors and windows of those rooms, just because I don't know, made everyone feel uncomfortable. But just think about what you want the day to be like. Let the student guide that conversation, but plan in advance. Because if everyone knows the plan, then we're not going to have an argument in the hallway, because it's like, you're going to help me get checked in, you're going to help me find my warm-up room, but once I'm warming up, like, you go back and go go to the lobby or go have a cup of coffee and I'll meet you, you know. So just discuss these things in advance because auditions are extremely stressful. If we can take that one kind of family stress piece out, it can make it a lot better experience for everyone. Um, Also, and this is also where parents can really help, is to try to use the audition day as a campus visit and really learn. Many times, because you might be auditioning in February or early March, this might be the last time you're out of school before you have to make this big 4-year decision, because sometimes it's hard to like get back there in April before you make your decision by May 1st. So it's a really key opportunity. It's hard for the student because you're trying to be in the zone about your audition and trying to stay focused and probably experiencing a decent amount of nerves if you're anything like me. So it's hard for the student to kind of relax into that, but often that's where a parent can really help. A parent can go to info sessions and kind of, take some notes or, go on a tour, because, the student is just in their warm-up room anyway. So it can help to kind of divide and conquer a little bit in that way. And then also, it's really important to try to talk with current students when you're there. There'll usually be current students outside the audition room. There'll be current students checking you in when you enter the building. Talk to those people. They're the ones living this experience you're trying to get involved in. And they're usually the most honest about it, right? Like, admissions offices and marketing tries to make very slick videos and brochures and things. The current students will usually tell you what it's really like. So take advantage of that and talk to them. All right, and then more about live auditions. So yeah, kind of hinted at it before, but stress, I think, can be at least, hold back a little bit the more you prepare logistically, but then also kind of the mental side of audition preparation. Everyone gets nervous. It's human nature in these big situations, and you walk into an unfamiliar room and there's a panel of all these esteemed faculty, for your body to just kick into the adrenaline and kick into all kind of feelings. So I think and there's so many great resources now about performance anxiety, because it's coming more and more kind of out and easy to talk about, or people used to hide it. No need to hide it. It's a very natural reaction. I think the key and what happens to people who get really successful as performers is they learn to channel these kind of things, rather than let them overwhelm them. But everyone's coming from a different place with this. And you can go through waves in your career. I mean, I feel like I performed for many years, and I had times where I was less nervous than other years where I had a lot of anxiety about some performances. So it was kind of, what it was not consistent, and that maybe made it even harder to deal with at times. But don't be afraid of being nervous about auditions, because everybody is. No one likes them. The faculty who are sitting there, judging you, they're just glad they're not up there because they don't like them either. They've had to do them their whole career, but it's no one's favorite. So to prepare, any opportunity for mock auditions, take it. If you hear anything about people doing that, and ask your teacher, just to try to arrange that experience. If they have colleagues they could bring in, they can set up a table and sit there at a table as a small panel and have you come in and play your repertoire. That's really, really helpful. The more you do it, even doing it in front of your family, it's like can feel a little odd, but it's also just helpful, to kind of keep playing your repertoire in front of people and not just in the practice room. The audition experience is tricky because many times they're just like, okay, thank you. And it's not that they think you're bad. It's not that they just can't hear anymore, can't stand to hear anymore. It's just time is short. Most auditions are 10, 12, 15 minutes the longest. And so they're trying to cover a lot of ground in a very short period of time. So they've they've heard what they need to hear from that piece, and then they'll ask you to move on. Now, sometimes they'll just say, hey, can you start, here, the recapitulation, or can you start kind of at that second, when the second motif comes in. That part's hard. So ask your teacher to have you just jump around and start at kind of random places. They make requests, and you try to kind of take a moment to center yourself of where you would be if you were coming at that, at that part of the music from the beginning, and then start, because that's another thing that is very common in auditions and not at all common in our performing lives, because when do you just start randomly halfway through a piece? I think it's also important to understand, and kind of your mindset is that the audition is not a competition. They're not trying to find like one winner or, a placement, right? They're trying to assess if they admit you, you potentially are going to go there for 4 years and be around them for 4 years, every week, almost every day in the hallway, right? So they're trying to see like, are you going to be a good fit for what it's like in that community for 4 years, right? So it's not a competition. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be the top player. You have to demonstrate that you're the type of person that will do well there, that you'll fit in and you'll be able to, learn and um, just be a good member of their studio, be a good member of the ensembles, things like that. So just know that like sometimes that kind of demonstrating of your personal skills is also really important. Um, I mean, I don't know why I put this one in here, but we all make mistakes. Most people, when you walk out of the audition room, don't think it went well. Um, I even for a while experienced this thing where I like if I thought it went well, I didn't get opportunities, and if I thought it was terrible, then I would. And I was like, what's happening here? But again, it's so you're so in your own head often. So just keep working to stay focused, right? All you're there to do is show them your potential and try to show them that you belong in that type of program. And then this one's really hard, but expect a shift and expect a shift to some interview questions. So many schools don't tell you that this is coming. And often it's like the biggest trip up because then people are like, what? There's an interview. Because faculty, they've got you in the room, they want to get to know you and they want to appear to be friendly as well. So many auditions will shift from, they'll have you play a few pieces and then they'll ask you some questions. So be ready for that. And so some things they may ask you about your career goals. You can't, obviously, I'm sure they're complex. Don't give a 10-minute answer, but try to just practice kind of distilling down to what some of those big goals are. And then obviously if you can like segue it to, and that's why like coming here to your program would really help me because of this, that could be a really awesome answer. Some will just ask you musical questions, things about your favorite rep, your favorite composers, because they're just trying to get to know a little bit more about what makes you tick, or based on something they heard in the audition, like, oh, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, Shostakovich, I see it. Um, Sometimes if they've looked at your resume and it's like, oh, I know your teacher, or I went to, undergrad with your band director, like they'll start making small talk about that. So be, prepared. Music is a small world, so sometimes they just want to talk about it. And then sometimes they will ask you more specifically, like that essay earlier, like why are you interested in our program? Like why would you want to come here? What do you want to get out of our program? So again, know where you are, know what state you're in at that point, and some specific things about about why you'd want to be there. So just be prepared. I think as long as students know the interview questions may be coming, um, it's fine. It's just I've seen people thrown for a loop when it's all brand new. All right, questions. So, man, that was a lot of things. Maybe I'll stop share so I can see all of you, and I can also see things if people want to. Obviously, if you want to like raise your hand or unmute, I'd say that's fine, or we can just put them all over here in the chat. Um,
It's just been very thorough.
um,
You-
maybe I'd love to hear from the seniors who are in, what yeah, are there things that I haven't covered that you've run across, or are there aspects of this that were a surprise to you, so we can help the kind of juniors and sophomores not be so surprised.
We have a
Oh.
question in the chat.
Yeah,
Is there
Natalie.
anything between the audition process for music education versus performance?
That's a great question. Yeah, at most schools, kind of. So, often you'll find that sometimes the repertoire requirements for a music ed major are scaled back a little bit. I was working earlier today with a clarinetist, and we are looking at a program, and it's like, if you're performance, then they want 2 solo works and, multiple etudes, whereas for the music ed major, they just wanted 1 solo work, and you have to bring like a fast etude or something, right? So that's all usually made pretty clear on their website in terms of audition requirements. There were also fewer scales needed, for performance majors. They wanted up to like 7 sharps and flats. But the other big piece that music ed applicants should expect is a more formal interview, because they still want to see that you can play, because you're going to have to play in the ensembles, you're going to have to take lessons, so you will almost inevitably have to audition. But they also want to talk to you about kind of your educational goals and see, kind of your potential approach to kind of leadership in a classroom. Audition wise, it's similar, but then there's often the extra, like a kind of a more formal type of interview, not just a few questions at the end of your playing, because often you'll play for the performance faculty, you'll play for, if you're a clarinetist, you'll play for the clarinet, faculty members, but then you'll have a separate interview with the music education faculty, who are more kind of classroom professors.
And I also want to be respectful of everyone's time as well. And so I want to close with just a few reminders. I don't know if Alex, if you're able to stay on, if there's any additional questions, then we can stay on and ask those. But yeah, I just wanted to share a few things. But thanks so much, everyone, for coming, and thank you, Dr. Powell, just for just all these amazing insights. I wanted to plug 2 things, and I'll also turn it over to Liz if she has anything additional she'd like to share as well. But for any of you all who are applying to summer study programs, check out our common application for summer study. We're going to be hosting a virtual fair next week on November 20th from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Eastern. And I'll throw the link to registration for that in the chat. The next event in this college prep series is about navigating college and the audition process for undocumented parents. That's going to be on December 3rd from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern as well. And that's something that Liz's team is going to be spearheading. And so I didn't know if you wanted to add anything additional, Liz.
Yeah, we have an alumni from Peabody, who is also an alumni from an Sistema USA program speaking, who's now working at NEC, Sheila Esquivel, and someone from Stanford University who has an expertise in immigration and college education. And so for students who might be undocumented, or who have parents who are undocumented, who just have questions about navigating that process, we have some resources for you. And that, again, is on December 3rd at 7 p.m. Eastern time.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, everyone, for coming. And like I said, if there's any additional questions, we'll be on this for a little bit.